man, I have to say, I still dig that song. Every time I hear it, I'm like, oh. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Midweek with Meaning. Thank you for joining in. Please, as you're watching live, please say hello. Let me know where you're coming in from. It's always helpful to see who's here, who's with me. And if you're watching the replay, please put replay in the comments because I'd love to know that you've checked it out. So, hi, I am Angela Ward, registered nurse and soul midwife, the CEO of Guardian at the Gateway, where we help people journey within and return renewed. And I do this show for you every single week based on some of the things that I'm hearing from my clients, from things that I'm discovering in my own work. And yeah, I really wanted to share this topic with you today around the idea of forgiveness. So, who here maybe holds on to a grudge? I mean, I'm one of those people that's pretty good at keeping a little checklist in my back pocket of like, oh yeah. Who here beats themselves up for something that they've done? Or the way that they are. Do you ever go down that path? So the reason I'm asking these very simple questions is because forgiveness is what we're talking about today. Why is it important that we talk about forgiveness? Because forgiveness really has little to do with the person, place, or situation that needs to be forgiven. And it has so much more to do with how we carry that energy in our own bodies, right? So I want to approach this in two ways. I want to talk today about not only forgiveness of other, but also forgiveness of self. They're very much related, but I think we need to kind of differentiate them a tiny bit. So many of us have had situations where we've rightly, perhaps, been hurt, or a boundary's been crossed, or something's happened that creates anger, sadness, grief, whatever, trauma even, and we remain really angry at someone. Now, I'll use a personal example. I can think of a former employer that had behaved in a certain way that was just really unbearable for me. And every time I would think about the situation, even years later, the kind of fire would come back up, and my sense of justice and sense of rightness and the sense of what a horrible person that person was, like, it would just get me twisted up in knots around the anger that I had and the justification that I felt about the situation and my role within it. And I can think of examples throughout my life, as I imagine you likely can too. Think of situations where you were victimized or harmed in some way. And those things are very valid. I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel the feelings that you're feeling. But what I noticed for myself is it didn't make sense, the response that I was having, so much longer after the situation occurred, to the idea, the memory of the situation, and the vitriol that I carried about that situation. What it actually did was, when I would revisit those situations, it would just cause me turmoil. It would cause me more stress. It would just spike my adrenaline. It would just get me super flared up. And what I realized, and I'm not the first person, I'm sure, at all that's talked about this, is that being so angry or having this position had nothing to do with this other person. Like, the other situation didn't give a shit if I was angry at them or sad at them or over it or whatever. They've moved on into their own thing. But all that turmoil and blah was just mine, that I got to carry all the time. And that sucks. Sucks. It so sucks to deal with that situation. So when I need to work on forgiveness in this type of situation, it helps me to relax my stressed and traumatized body. It helps me get out of anger and fight or flight. Now, let's talk a little bit about self forgiveness. This is very similar. There are, but it's so much more complicated because we are oftentimes, maybe we've done something, thought something, behaved in a certain way, not followed through in a certain way, not done something or whatever that we then become angry at ourselves for, or we're disappointed in ourselves. Can I get an amen? Does anyone experience this ever, where or something's happened and all of that energy, you just, instead of being angry at other, you're just like, ugh, oh, I suck. I'm a piece of crap. Why can't I ever do that right? Or here I am again in that same path. So stupid. That's what I hear a lot from my clients. I'm so stupid. Whew. So that is so complicated because not only are we carrying that energy that maybe we were, when we discussed earlier about having an other person violate us, right? Now we've taken that energy that we were feeling towards them and we're just projecting it onto ourselves. So we're like beating ourselves up. But then there's also the part of ourself that feels diminished by the beating up. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to you. It's so complicated because it can turn into this really vicious spiral of like, you can't ever get out of this way of thinking and behaving. It's just like so jammed in there. And it's so challenging to change it. So I wanted to talk today about forgiveness and why this matters for us, and then some ideas, techniques to help you start on the path of forgiveness. So obviously, when I just said we're in that place where we're angry at ourselves and beating ourselves up and then diminishing ourselves, that just is such an uncomfortable place to live, right? It's just such an uncomfortable place to live. And it's not actually serving you to do that. It's not serving you. It may be a way that you've learned to cope in the world, but it's really not healthy. If we need to talk about the evidence related to being in constant fight or flight or a trauma response, or the ways that we're unable to connect, think clearly, the ways that our bodies respond to high levels of stress like that, I'm happy to do a show that dives deeper into the levels of what stress does to your body, but I don't actually think you need to know that. You probably already know that when you are angry at other and really carrying a grudge about something, legitimate or no, can be absolutely legitimate, or beating up on yourself, that it just is really difficult to live in that type of situation. So we have to unburden ourselves of these things. This is a process and requires ongoing work and focus to be able to learn how to forgive and how to carry ourselves through in the world. So when I'm talking about forgiving other, I want to be certainly clear that forgiving a violation of other does not mean that I'm asking you to give up any boundaries. I'm not saying that, let's say you had a difficult relation with a family member that you've cut off because they treated you in a certain way. I am not saying that you need to extend the olive branch and forgive that person and reconnect. Your boundaries and your reasons for disconnecting are 100% valid, and I want to honor that. However, still carrying that energy towards that other person is just detrimental. So even me talking about this, I can feel myself getting kind of charged up. Do you guys feel that? Do you feel like when we think about it, whew, it just like starts building. And then when we're doing the same thing towards ourselves and we're internalizing that anger and frustration, it's just, the burden is so heavy and so depressive and so incredibly stressful. So there's a couple different techniques I want to talk about. In order for us to learn to forgive, we also have to learn how to trust ourselves and set healthy boundaries with ourselves and make agreements with ourselves and be in integrity with ourselves. That is ongoing work. I'm happy to talk about that more in Midweek with Meaning, and that's also the work that I do with my clients. And yes, I'm happy to talk with you more about that. However, we can get started today. There are some techniques that are very specific to forgiveness that can help so much. So I learned the technique of Ho'oponopono a number of years ago and then had it brought back in by a coach of mine recently. And I've been working with it with my clients, and it's such a powerful practice. So Ho'oponopono, I feel like I should write this out for you guys somewhere so you can see how to spell it. Give me a second. I hope I'm even saying it right. My apologies if I'm saying it wrong. Okay. Let me show that one. Oh, it doesn't need to scroll, but there it's scrolling for you. So the Ho'oponopono practice, my understanding of the meaning of this is that it means, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. So please write that down if you're watching right now. Ho'oponopono means, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. So this practice you can do on your own, anywhere, anytime. What I would do is encourage you to be in a space where you can say it out loud and be private in the process. There's a couple different ways you can work with this. With some of my clients where I'm doing ketamine-assisted therapy, we'll use this in a ketamine session as they're landing and just kind of softening into some of these places where we're holding very rigidly. And you can say the practice, say the words, not Ho'oponopono, but say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you, over and over, with either considering yourself in mind, maybe the young part of you that you're beating up on for being stupid, if that's what your thing is, if that's what's going on for you. You can either direct it towards yourself, or you can hold the thought of the person or situation that was problematic to you in your mind and say it there. I do think this is a little bit of a harder practice to think of the person that violated you or the situation. That can be really challenging to approach. And I would encourage you, if you're going to, especially if you have some trauma, please work with someone to support you in moving through this process of forgiveness while maintaining boundaries. But you can always start with yourself. And when you say that out loud to yourself, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you, over and over and over again for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, things start to crack open. I've cried in this process. I've had people cry doing this process. And it isn't so much that you need to know exactly what you're thinking about, what you're saying I'm sorry for, what you're asking for forgiveness for, because it's not even about that. It's not about it is helpful to understand the details, but when you're in that practice, you don't need to know exactly, I'm sorry for not showing up the way that I intended. I'm sorry for that. You can let that go. You can journal about that if you need to understand what you're sorry about and what you'd like forgiveness for. But just that practice of saying those words can be so impactful. So impactful. If you do feel like trying it with someone that has violated you, do low-hanging fruit, right? Let's say maybe a partner or a friend that had maybe hurt your feelings or something kind of like little more subtle, that's not got such high stakes. But the more you practice this, the more you're going to be able to start flexing that self-forgiveness muscle, and you will feel that burden drop. This is also beautifully accessed through a loving kindness meditation practice where you hold yourself in mind and then a beloved other in mind. Next level, you could hold a challenging person in mind, where you think of yourself, other, whoever, as being at peace, having joy, having happiness, being free of suffering, being full of love, being covered in kindness, and really speaking through that together. Speaking through however you might want to say that. I wish this being peace. I wish you love. I wish you joy. Things like that. And that practice can also really help to soften some of this holding and that energy that's in that place where we have pain or suffering. And another thing that I think can be helpful is for us to spend time writing about what needs forgiving and why. So I encourage all of my clients, and I journal daily as well, where every day I ask you to think about what needs forgiving from yesterday and maybe why it needs forgiving, if you can contemplate that. And maybe even the obstacle that set you up, if it's a thing that you did that you'd like to change without beratement. Like, let's say one that I've been working with lately is not following through with my personal agreements. Like, I'm down to serve you guys. I'm totally down. I'll show up. I'll do my thing with you. But sometimes I'll make plans or agreements with myself about things I want to do or ways that I want to think and act, and I don't always follow through with that. So for me, that's being out of integrity with myself. When I'm out of integrity with myself, I don't trust myself. So, but I also can't move into my day being like, well, you failed at this yesterday, so how are you going to fail at it today? Right? I can't come into that just like, you suck. I need to come in with a clean slate, try again. But in order to do that, I have to consciously release that piece that needs forgiving, right? So I would really, really encourage that as well. So there's a couple other tools I have for you. One is, I think it's really essential to be able to have examples of forgiveness in your brain, like hearing other people talk about it. So there's two things I want to share with you. One is this incredible song that I wish that I could just play for you on here, but I know if I do, I will get flagged of like stealing other people's content. But there's a song by Future Primitive called The Art of Self-Forgiveness. I've put it in the notes, so they should show up in all of the platforms where you're watching. There's a link to that, and I'd really encourage you to watch it. Future Primitive is spelled P-H-U, future with a P-H instead of a F. So Future Primitive's song called The Art of Self-Forgiveness. It is so, so powerful. Give yourself time, if you can, right after watching this, to listen to it just quietly. It's 5 minutes long. It's really, really helpful. Also, I don't know if you knew this, but friends, I do create playlists on Spotify. Specifically, they're primarily for working with my clients that do ketamine-assisted therapy with me. But I had a client recently that really needed an approach with medicine that wasn't, she wasn't just safe alone in her own head. So I created a playlist that was kind of a way to implant really positive songs in her head. So if you go to Spotify and you search for ketamine download, that playlist has a bunch of real positivity, really interesting contemplations in it. Some of the songs are more like mantras that you could kind of sing along with, or affirmations. Other songs are a little bit instructional, if that makes sense. But it is specifically designed for working with ketamine. However, it also is lovely if you have an hour or so that you could do just a deep meditative listening session. Put some headphones on, get in your body, do some breath work perhaps, and allow the music to kind of flood into you. I think you would really, really dig it. The Art of Self-Forgiveness is included on that playlist. So you might want to check that out. So yeah, I would suggest looking there so you have a little more tools so you can start rewiring how you think. That's tricky. If you don't know how to think differently, if you don't have other resources to pull from about how to think differently, what do you replace your thoughts with? You know? So this might be a really great resource for you. I'd love to talk with you more about other options of ways to help work on clearing your mind. But before we go, I want to draw a card for you. Draw a card for you today and see what it might have to say in relationship to the idea of forgiveness. So, before I draw that card, I want to ask, if you're watching on any of these platforms, please either follow me on Instagram or subscribe to my YouTube channel. Reach out. I have a bunch going on. I have a future psychedelic doula training program that's coming up. I'd love to talk with people who are interested more about that. I'll talk more about that very shortly. Not today, but shortly. I was just on a cool podcast. If you're on any of my platforms, you'll see that I shared about it, and it was really great. And if you want to check it out and listen, yeah, but I'd appreciate your following and liking and subscribing, because if you chat with me and tell me what you want to know about, I keep saying, it's all about you. It's all about you. What's up for you and how may I serve you? So we're going to get our cards going. We're doing the Sacred Earth Oracle still, because thank you, Ellie. I promised this deck I would get to know it a little better, and this is one of the ways I'm doing that. And I'm looking for just a perspective on forgiveness. What do we need to know? What might make this forgiveness conversation more impactful? So let's do this one. Although like 3 tried to come with me. Okay, here we go. Give me a second. I've got to get my eyeballs on. And honestly, I might need more light. Okay, who did we get today? We got, we got alchemy again. We've had alchemy before on this channel. Oh, so good. Okay, well, before I even read this card, let me tell you what I think about alchemy in relationship to forgiveness. Whew, this is what I think. Alchemy in its original sense is the art of transmuting lead into gold, right? The alchemist's duty was to transmute, to change lead into gold. And a lot of people thought that was a legitimate, like, actual thing that they were doing, but it wasn't actually. Like, they were taking lead out of the ground and trying to do things to it to make it turn gold. What they were talking about was taking that heavy, dense, bound, like muted stuff that we carry and changing it through this process of engagement, forgiveness, gratitude, mindset, magic, right? Language, and turning that into gold, into the shiny parts of your life. That's what I feel this card's about. But let's see what the book says. Do you like the alchemy card? I'm asking you guys already. Okay, let's see what alchemy has to say for itself. Okay, here, you can look at it while I read it to you, hopefully. Boop. Rocks are formed and reformed in the crust and upper mantle of our planet. When melted rock in the form of magma or lava cools, it becomes igneous rock. I think I had a problem with that word before. Over time, igneous rock erodes and reforms as sedimentary or secondary rock. Heat and pressure deep within the earth transform. Heat and pressure. Just wanted to emphasize those words. Heat and pressure deep within the earth transform both of these types of rock into metamorphic rock. Like metamorphosis, like a butterfly. Even the most steadfast, most long-standing objects formed in our planet's infancy could be transformed. Do not accept anything as given. Transform any tenacious, hindering habits, doubts, or beliefs by working on them deep within your center. The alchemical fire at your core is a constant. Use it to transform any rubble that may be hindering you into a precious gem. Turn lead into gold. Let your true self surface. Refine, polish, and respect its beauty, strength, and value. That's exactly what we do here at Guardian at the Gateway, by the way. We help you get to that refined, polished, respected for your beauty, strength, and value. Oh, hell yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit more because we still have a few minutes. The earthly meaning. It is up to you to acknowledge an obstacle as impermanent. Regardless of who is to blame, it is your responsibility to defy a false limitation. A quirk or idiosyncrasy is a strength. Bring it out and own it. Individuality is a precious gem. Throw your woes into the same melting pot and craft them into powerful tools. I like that. Experiment with what you have and give it value. Yes. So that to me says if some of these techniques that I suggested today are not quite fitting for you, it's an experiment. Keep seeking, seeker. Keep seeking. You will find the thing that unlocks this forgiveness for you. Give it a real serious try. You'll find your way. I have no doubt. Okay. The spiritual meaning of this card. Life is perpetual movement, and yet life is also still. Life is change, and yet it is also unchanging. You are part of this moving stillness, changing and unchanging through time and eternity. Something is moving within you. Something is moving within a still part of you, and yet something is still within a moving part of you. Meditate on this. Feel complete oneness in your being. That's a little trickier one for me. I'd love to hear your ideas about how that relates to forgiveness. That's interesting because I think we spent some time where I was talking about how that anger carries an energy behind it, or victim or pain or abuse or whatever the feeling is. Like it has an energy, but it also seems locked down in people in a way, right? Like it seems like it's still and it doesn't leave, right? Does that make sense? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to message me or just post it in whatever platform you're watching this on. And let me know what you think about this, the alchemy card, the art of self-forgiveness, the art of transformation, of turning your lead into gold. And I'd love to hear more. So check out that Spotify playlist. Let me know what you think. Check out that song, The Art of Self-Forgiveness by Future Primitive. Let me know what you think. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you. So thank you for watching today, my friends. I'll be back here next Wednesday with another episode. I think we might be talking about trust next week, but I'm not certain. It's kind of on my radar. I feel like that's an essential, right? I think we've talked about integrity. I think talking about trust might be next, but we'll see. All right. Love you, my friends. Thank you for being here today. Bye.